Good evening, everybody that's coming in. Welcome to another one of Homeline's Tenant Organizing Webinars. As we roll in here, if people want to just pop in the chat, your name, where you're coming from, and we'll play a little guessing game. There is no prize, but we'll get some fun answers, hopefully. What's your best guess on the population of renters in some of our suburbs? So what percentage of the population in Bloomington rents their home, or in Woodbury or Brooklyn Center?
I am not allowed to answer, correct?
No,
I know
you're not allowed to. You know.
I love winning, so you know.
There is no prize except for pride. We'll see. And we'll see how close y'all get. So welcome, everybody. We're gonna wait a couple minutes to start while we just get some people rolling in here. We're so happy to have everyone here. Yeah, Erin, don't guess. Steve, I'd love to see your guess. What do you think the percentage of renters is in some of our suburbs? How many people rent? You too, Kara. You should know. You live in Bloomington. What's the percentage of renters out here? All right, 35%. Okay. Hi, Emily from Chicago. Steve, that's a good one. All right, that's a good guess. Great. Let's see who else. Awesome. We'll just wait just a little bit longer here. Welcome. For those that have just arrived, feel free to pop your name, where you're coming to us from. And if you've got a good guess on what is the percentage of renters in some of our big suburbs out here. We'll just give that a couple more minutes. All right, 30%. It's a good one. Alyssa, what city do you think that is? Bloomington, Woodbury, Brooklyn Center, all of them? Hi, Ruth. Oh, okay. Okay, we're looking at about that. No, that's okay, Kara. You know, I started this. It's really funny. We're having this webinar, Organizing in the Suburbs, because we'll get started about this in just a moment. I started this and worked on this with Erin. Renters live here too, because when I first started organizing, I got plopped down on the suburbs and was like, we have renters in suburbs. I thought they were, assumptions of primarily homeowners, primarily single family homes. So I learned a lot. I have learned a lot. There are a lot of renters that live here. And we're getting some really, really good guesses. All right. Great. Fun. I really love that we got somebody from out of state. That's so cool. Welcome. Okay. Super.
Emily, what suburb of Chicago do you live in? Just out of curiosity. Like every good Minnesotan, I have an uncle that lives out there. So, you could live in the city where my uncle lives.
Yeah, we do. I think I have people that live out in Chicago, no family, but. Okay. Awesome. Great. All right. Well, let's get started here. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Reagan. I'm a tenant organizer at Homeline. And we're here to talk about organizing in the suburbs. We've talked about organizing in mobile homes. We've talked about kind of organizing in general, but every place is unique. And that does not exclude the suburbs. Every suburb is unique, and there are different tactics and different ways that we need to approach our organizing efforts, particularly in the suburbs. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Move on to the next slide. Just a little bit about Homeline before we start, and also just as a heads up to everybody else, this session is being recorded. I am not a lawyer. We do have attorneys at Homeline. So nothing I say on here is legal advice, but if you do have a question, a legal question, feel free to reach out to our hotline. We offer our services in English, Spanish, Somali, and Hmong. So reach out to us. We do some really cool work. I'm just not a lawyer. I'll just help y'all organize. Move on. We're going to have a couple of speakers with us tonight. I've already introduced myself, but a little bit more background. Me and my team at Homeline, the organizing team, we serve all of Minnesota in organizing efforts, but I specifically have a really good focus on the suburbs, Bloomington, Edina, and Richfield, most specifically, but that's where a lot of my work concentration has been. And I will let our esteemed panelists also introduce themselves.
I can go first. Hi, my name is Fatima Mohammed. I am the housing organizer with ACER. ACER stands for African Career Education Resource. We are based in the northwestern suburbs, specifically in Brooklyn Park, but we also work in Brooklyn Center, New Hope, Robbinsdale, Crystal, that whole area. I'll pass it to Margaret. Thank you.
Hey everyone. I just got a notice from my headset that my battery is running low, of course. So I'm gonna, after I do my intro, I'm gonna plug in my headset for a second and hope it doesn't die on me. My name is Margaret Prez. I have a public health background, and I have a background working in the nonprofit and public sectors. I am currently the manager of outreach and special initiatives at the Metro HRA, which is the largest HRA in the state of Minnesota. We primarily work with housing choice voucher recipients. However, I just joined the Metro HRA in August, at the end of August this past year. And prior to that, I was working for the city of Bloomington, managing a grant related to chronic health conditions, and did a lot of work specifically with the renter community. And kind of generally my background is in sort of public participation and organizing with groups of people to inform systems change. And I've done that both in the nonprofit and in the public sector. So bringing more of the institutional perspective, the inside game.
The inside game. We got the inside and the outside game here.
Exactly,
I'm really
yep.
proud of like the panelists that we have here. Just a little bit of a heads up for y'all on what we're going to be talking about today. First, you're going to hear from me a little bit. I'm going to give us some numbers. We're going to talk about population of renters in our suburbs. We're going to talk about what the future of our suburb housing landscape looks like. And touch on also some like examples of organizing that you may or may not have known about. We'll move on to hear a little bit from Margaret, get some of that inside perspective on, you know, what's the viewpoint on suburbs? What are the assumptions kind of made by cities about who lives there? And then we'll get to hear from Fatima, who's doing some really, really radical, amazing policy work up in Brooklyn Center and Brooklyn Park. So we'll get to hear a little bit more from our two panelists about what they do, and then we'll move on to some panel questions that I came up with, just to get a general feel about what the landscape is, what that looks like for us as organizers in the suburbs. And then we'll have some time for questions from the audience. So think about this, get us some really good questions, put our toes to the fire a little bit. We're here to talk and have a good discussion about this. Okay, we're gonna begin with some numbers. Oop. Did this freeze for you too?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Looks like it's glitching out. We'll just give it 1 second maybe. Okay.
Oop. Still looks weird to me. Does anybody in the chat want to tell us if it looks okay to them? Because it looks weird to me still.
Yeah, it looks weird to me too. It looks like a big old
Okay.
box.
Oh, okay.
How's
Okay,
it?
there we go. We got it fixed. This is great. Thank you, IT. Thank you, Erin. So as a lot of us probably know, renters make up a really significant portion of the population in many cities across the Twin Cities metro. And our suburbs are really not excluded from this at all, despite whatever assumptions I may have had prior to working out here. Bloomington, for example, that's our third largest city in the metro and is where Homeline is based now as well. We recently made a move out here, so good to focus on that. Bloomington has 32.7% of its population rents. That's 29,000 plus people. Brooklyn Center, we've got nearly 40%, and that's about 13,000 people. You moved a slide, Erin, if you want to go back one. Brooklyn Park has 28.3, Richfield with 39.5, and Woodbury with 19.2, which is lower than the others, but that is a significant number because that is a 50% increase since 2000. When we compare that to Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minneapolis exceeds, the majority of its population rents, and St. Paul is right up there too, with half of its population renting. The population sizes are really dramatic here when we look at the number of people, but even in our smaller cities, 40%, that's only about 10% behind. We're still looking, they're creeping up on half of the population renting. It is a significant part of all of these cities. And 14,000, 13,000, that's not a small number of people when you really start looking at the individuals that are living there. Let's see, and we can move on. And that is only going to increase. We're really seeing some reports, if you're watching housing news as closely as I do, because I like to nerd out about it quite a bit. We're seeing a lot of estimates that people are going to continue to leave urban cores and start moving outward, looking for more affordable housing. And we're seeing the renting population steadily increase over the years. What we're looking at right now is the housing permits that were given out by Bloomington. And you can see in the last 15 years, the orange part here represents multifamily units or permits that were allowed. That is almost the entirety of what they have been allowing. So these cities have been expecting and are expecting that their renting population is going to continue. This is more, our cities are getting more dense. They're growing, we're increasing in population. Even when you look at like the population growth, they're increasing dramatically. And it's a really good indicator of what the future expectations of who these cities think are going to be living in there. If we want to move on, we see a similar trend also in Brooklyn Center. Not a lot of development up until about 5 years ago. They weren't putting a lot of permits out there, but it did explode. And they're putting in hundreds of units in the last 5 years, almost all dedicated to multifamily housing, which is 5 units or more under this definition. And all this info comes from the Metropolitan Council specifically. And if we keep going, we've got Woodbury next. And Woodbury's also been increasing. We're seeing a mix, they're putting up a lot more single family housing than the other two suburbs that we were looking at. But even between that, the single family housing is represented by the blue. We've got the green is townhomes, and we've got orange, which is multifamily. And with this one, single family homes can also be rented. So can townhomes. So we're seeing a massive increase in this. And when the other examples that I also gave earlier, when we were talking about the actual percentages of renter population, their graphs also show a similar trend of just, we're putting in a lot more housing towards renters. We're focusing a lot more on that. And like I said, every city is really unique in this, and every suburb is going to have a different approach and a different way of addressing some needs. But it is still really important that we are recognizing that this growth is happening, and it's going to continue to be happening. throughout this. If we want to move on to the next slide, I really wanted to highlight here some of the really important efforts in suburban organizing that have happened recently. Organizing has been, is, and will continue to happen in our suburban cities. And as we see our cities become more dense and as we see more people move into them, gentrification is happening in our suburbs. We are seeing rental trends of displacement. A really unfortunate example of this is the Crossroads at Penn in Richfield, Minnesota. It's now known as the Concierge. And you may know about it from a documentary called Sold Out. And we'll be putting the link to that. It's a free documentary. I highly recommend watching it. It does a really good job at highlighting like kind of the crisis that we have of affordable housing here in the cities. And we'll get a link for that in the chat for you shortly. But there was 698 units at the Crossroad at Pence. I was home to several thousand people, and most of them were displaced after the property was bought in 2015. The property was upscaled, so people came in, they redid the apartments, they added new amenities, they changed the tenant screening rules, they added credit limits, they changed how many people could be in a unit and what the income limits needed to be. And this saw mass displacement. We saw mass displacement after this. And that displacement undid almost all of the efforts done by Richfield in recent years to increase affordable housing units. I think they had built just over 700 new units. And after after Crossroads, that was almost all taken up by people moving and leaving. This had a massive impact on the community. And like I said, highly recommend watch that documentary. It really changed my perspective on stuff. Another spot to highlight is Huntington Place Apartments in Brooklyn Park. Now, we didn't see mass displacement here, fortunately. That's 834 units, and that is the second largest apartment complex in the metro. And that's right behind Cedar Riverside Apartments. This was bought by Dominium, which is a private housing developer in the 1990s. And after some really intense organizing efforts, it was sold to Aon, which is a nonprofit housing developer. And, you know, their aim is to keep housing affordable. They bought it in 2019, and they've committed to making the property remain affordable. However, there are still issues there. There are still issues with maintenance. There are still issues with security. It's, you know, organizing still needs to happen there. And these are just two examples that we have. But now we'll move on and we'll hear a little bit from Margaret for right now about why is this? Why do we have kind of a slow response from our cities on, you know, renter presence?
I'll try and tackle it. I'll do my best. So I'm just going to share a little bit about kind of my journey into this work. I mentioned that I have a public health background. I found myself working at the City of Bloomington's Division of Public Health, which just serves Richfield and Edina, Minnesota, which are all first tier suburbs of the city of Minneapolis, for those of you that are out of the metro area. And I was with the City of Bloomington, again, which serves Richfield at the time that Crossroads was upscaled. And at the time, I remember us basically just scrambling, like trying to figure out as a city and as a public health department, like what is our role and what is our response. At the same time, there was also a mobile home park, not at the same time, it was probably a year or two later. There was a mobile home park in Bloomington that closed, and I was called in because I speak Spanish to translate for community meetings between the residents and the city's community development office. And I really found myself in this in-between space where I was representing the city. And as one of the renters in the room at the time, one of the mobile home park residents at the time said, you know, you've just come to put flowers on our grave. This isn't actually doing anything. And I think that really like catapulted me in terms of my own personal journey and what is my responsibility as a staff person to be proactive about not just like consulting with renters, but really like working to build up the power of renters within cities. So as I kind of dug into this more, we had a project through the public health department where we did a health equity data analysis, and we chose to examine the intersection of health and housing. And for that, we did a series of focus groups with renters, specifically in Richfield. And again, this was post Crossroads, and we also had to compile a bunch of research from across the nation around the connections between housing and health. And then we connected that to kind of local issues and made some recommendations. Well, through that process, we really learned a lot of things about, who's renting in the cities that we serve. When you look at renter demographics, of all the people of color living in, I'll just throw out the Bloomington statistics. Of all the people of color living in Bloomington, over 75% of them rent their homes. And so, the city of Bloomington, many cities are investing very heavily in community engagement with the idea of wanting to expand their relationship and their connection with communities of color, and trying to build out I would say fancy equity initiatives that are often kind of surface, well-intentioned, but still remain really surface level. And one of the issues is that we are often, as city staff, we're organizing events using the existing tools and frames that we have as city staff. And traditionally, cities have served single-family white homeowners. And so even when we're trying to host an event and we translate it into Spanish and try to contract a cool graphic designer to make it so that it's a little bit more hip of a design, we're changing the outside without really changing the inside. And so I've done a lot of work in my career trying to grow awareness around the issues of renters. And a lot of times in cities, what that looks like is centering renters in data discussions. So cities use a lot of data to drive decision making. And if you're not disaggregating your data by who rents and who owns and looking at trends that way, then you're not going to be looking, then you're not going to be getting the full story. I just started with raising awareness about the fact that 34% of our residents in Bloomington rented their home. And I think that was really eye-opening for your just day-to-day, person working the permits at the front desk, who they're not really thinking in that in those terms. But when you kind of think about how serving a renter might look different than serving a single family homeowner, you just slowly start kind of shifting the slow moving cruise ship, as I often say to Reagan, towards kind of a reorientation away from single family homeowners and towards renters. I think what gets tricky is when we start using the word organizing. That makes city staff really uncomfortable. And it makes elected officials really uncomfortable. And it gets us into murky waters in terms of legality. Can a city support organizing efforts to essentially lobby us to change our policy, right? And so there's this whole weird kind of mental twisting that a lot of city staff have to do. And frankly, I'd say most city staff still don't quite understand how cities can support organizing, because we get so caught up in the idea of what is organizing and what is policy change. And I think, and I'll explain this in my comments, as I know I'm probably reaching my time limit, but right at time. So I'll just say that I'll kind of explain that maybe in some of my further responses to some of your other questions. But I think reframing, from a city staff side, what organizing is, it's democracy, it's citizenship. it's civic participation, and it's outreach and engagement. And if we can speak a little bit of that language, if you all can speak a little bit of that language as organizers with city staff, that also like warms the waters a little bit, so that people can feel like, oh yeah, we can fund ACER because they're not doing organizing work, they're doing civic participation work. They're helping with, you know, turnout or capacity building or leadership development. So a lot of those terms is just kind of shifting the language helps to reframe the conversation towards, you know, something that's maybe more palatable to cities.
I think that's a really, really great segue into what we're going to hear a little bit more from Fadumo about, because this is systemic. As we are having a lot of these conversations, a lot of these inequities are systemic inequities, but there are ways to change it. It's not all doom and gloom. And maybe from the inside, it's a little bit hard to rationalize how we're going to do that. But from the outside, we're seeing some really, really incredible stuff. I'm going to hand that over to Fadumo to talk a little bit more about what she's been able to do recently. And in that world of like, okay, the structure is different. We've got policies that are in place that don't support renters. Okay, let's change those policies. Let's write things that do support renters.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the most crucial thing for organizers are people who are part of, you know, the structure, like Margaret, who are also, you know, very, very understanding and support organizing. And who understand that organizing isn't always adversarial. In fact, it's just a different perspective. So for renters, it's being able to, you know, the difference between, for me, the difference between like policy making and organizing is that one is made from a perspective of a few, whereas the other is made from the perspective of the many. And so when renters are making, you know, a petition to their government and they're coming to city council and they are expending energy and time and resources to do that, that's actually a huge deal, because a lot of people don't actually, a lot of renters don't actually do that. It's a lot of hard work. So for example, the City of Brooklyn Center recently passed a just cause non-renewals ordinance and a pre-eviction notice. So what that means is renters get a notice before an eviction is filed against them, which makes a ton of sense, right? We've had renters who, you know, one day they wake up and they have an eviction filed against them and they didn't know what was the issue. For others, it was the lease being canceled or being put on month-to-month leases without a just reason, a valid reason. And so having just cause ordinance and that pre-eviction notice was really, really crucial. Essentially what happened was the eviction moratorium showed us that, you know, evictions aren't really necessary. And even when it, the off-ramp, even when it was, you know, tapering down, we saw that the numbers of evictions, for example, was like 1/5 the number that it is now. And as soon as rent help, for example, ended, those numbers increased 5 times. And so when you combine all of those things together, it catapults and like it galvanizes tenants to come together and to, you know, share their perspectives with their elected officials. A lot of the times, it feels like people don't even know the resources that are available to them. They don't know that, you know, people who are in government, who are part of the structure, actually do want to hear a different perspective and do support renters. It isn't always doom and gloom. You're right, Reagan. And a lot of times, you know, government officials get into government to make sure that people, you know, are doing well, and to hear their voices. But yeah, the just cause and just cause ordinance and the pre-eviction notice, the whole point of it was so that when the eviction moratorium does completely end and rent help does fully, you know, disappear, that renters have something to fall back on. Right now, Brooklyn Center is changing a lot, and its demographics is about maybe 60-70% people of color. And the really interesting thing about Minnesota as a whole is that usually it has really good metrics for housing, education, healthcare, and then you get, when you look at the nuances, right, when you get to, oh, like what percentage of, you know, students of color are doing well in schools, what percentage of people of color are doing well in housing, it doesn't do, like, our stats aren't so great. And so this hopefully, you know, levels the playing field for what tenants expect from that relationship between their landlord and what they can do. A lot of the times for communities of color, they experience discrimination, retaliation. Anytime a tenant goes to city council or shares their views, they receive a non-renewal, they receive a month-to-month lease, sometimes even an eviction. And it's just, yeah, it's really difficult. And those kind of things are difficult to prove that this person is a bad tenant, right? Like, you can't prove someone who's been paying their rent, who hasn't violated the lease, who's doing fine everything else. One time they tell you, hey, you got to fix my fridge, it's not working. And all of a sudden they have these
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like the response isn't always like, I know in our work, I'm sure as organizers, you see that where people come in and they're like, all I did was ask for something to get fixed, and now I'm being treated worse, or something has happened where my housing is in like not as secure as it was prior to me asserting my rights and asserting, like, you know, what my landlord has to hold up to. You know, we signed a contract together, you need to hold up to this, but now I am at risk of this. And as individuals, that is a really scary thing. So having something like a policy that shows, no, your landlord needs to tell you why they are evicting you, they need to tell you why they're not renewing you, is incredibly important. And Faduma, you kind of touched on this a little bit about, like, I love that holistic conversation of, like, it's not just your housing, like it affects schooling, it affects, with Margaret, like it affects other health outcomes. Kind of goes into our first panel question for the both of you. Why is it so important to be supporting renter power in the suburbs?
I think it would be interesting. I don't know if Fatima wants to, or if you even know, I don't know how recently you joined the staff of ACER, but like, and it's my understanding that ACER is like one of the first like organizations like held and focused, established by and focused on supporting people of color like in the suburbs, as opposed to, because this is like one of our big issues as like public sector staff. So the Metro HRA serves all of suburban Hennepin and Ramsey County, like except for Minneapolis and St. Paul, right? And then Anoka and Carver counties. And then of course the city of Bloomington's public health department, as I explained before, serves Edina and Richfield. So like, and then prior to my work in the public sector, I was working in Dakota County. So I've done, you know, most of my work working with kind of marginalized communities in suburbs. And I didn't like, it took me so long to like truly understand like why it was so challenging to do the type of like organizing work that I had previously done like in an urban environment. And I think there's just no organized, not just renter presence, but there's just no organized, there's no culture of organizing in the suburbs except for among white affluent homeowners or middle class homeowners, you know, for that respect, but we call it something different, right? We call that crime watch, we call that block clubs, right? Cities actually, like suburbs do organize. They're just, they have ways of framing it and talking about it that supports homeowners, which is, you know, how this suburbs were initially kind of founded was this idea of home ownership. The housing in Bloomington, our major rental properties and our NOAA properties in Bloomington, because of our proximity to the airport, originally those 1 and 2 bedroom units were constructed as workforce housing for our airport staff, like pilots that needed to like spend a night, you know, in the Twin Cities on a layover, or, you know, flight attendants, like singles, right? And now we've got families of 4, 5, 6 people living in these units, and a lack of, you know, 3, 4, 5 bedroom rental units. And so it's, you know, renters have always, of course, existed in the suburbs, but the extent to which people are arriving to the suburbs as renters or are being forced to be renters because of a lack of affordable home ownership opportunities really, really means that like communities have to shift to organizing, but it takes like, so I'm actually also from Bloomington, grew up there in the 80s and 90s. That's like another interesting little hook that I have here. And like I have generational wealth, right? So came from a homeowner family. And then, you know, my grandparents also had a home in the suburbs, right? My dad grew up in the suburbs of Minnesota, right? So we have generations of people that are like, you know, I wouldn't even call my family part of the political elite, right? Of Bloomington,
You're
right?
established.
But we're
You're
established and we
in
understand
the
how the systems work, and the systems were made to support
community.
us, right? And this is obviously, you know, similar to and very aligned with the concept of white privilege as well, but it's different in that no, I wouldn't even say it's different. It's just when you look at it, it's a very, very similar dynamic in terms of, you know, how the systems have been set up to support white home owning families. And so why it's important to be supporting renter power in the suburbs is because there's so little power, because the systems are just not set up to empower renters. They're really set up to empower property managers and owners and homeowners. So that's my response.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have a little bit to add to that?
I do. I think it's really important to support renter power in the suburbs because renters are experts in their lives and in the experiences that renting, pushes upon us. A lot of the times we assume that, oh, somebody has a PhD in housing policy or something, therefore they know how to make best housing policies. That's actually not correct. It's or the fact that a lot of times we assume that, oh, it's a landlord, they've been in the business for years or generations, they must know what's up, but they actually don't. It's the people who, live there day to day, who experience the instability, who experience the fragility. They are the people who really understand the nuances of what it's like to be renting. And they are the people who we should be taking, our policies from, because it directly impacts them. They have like grassroots level understanding. They have if we want to, in a democracy, power is supposed to be coming from the bottom up. And when we empower renters, when we give them power, we really have a more stable and more nuanced culture, more nuanced policies, and a more stable society, in my opinion. Also, renters are also the backbone of our communities. A lot of the times, renting isn't just for people who can't afford to buy a home. Sometimes it's a lot of like elderly communities that have owned previously, and maybe now they don't want to continue the responsibility of maintaining a home. And there, all of those groups of people are also renters. Protecting that backbone is really crucial if we want to have a stable community, because stable housing and like powerful renters contribute to like a healthy community, a healthy society.
I love both of your responses, and I hope that I think that covered that really well, why it's important to be supporting people that rent in suburbs, and moves on really great to our next question. We'll take about 5 minutes for this one, and then we can move on to questions from the audience. If you want to, Erin, if you want to move to the next slide. When we're targeting change at the city level, when we're trying to establish some sort of importance, like getting importance and focus on renter issues, what tactics can we use to engage our neighbors in our community? And then also, how do we get the attention of the city and show that like that's important?
Yeah, can I go first? I think I've had a little bit of experience. So for us, I think it's really important to be consistent. So one of the things that I was really surprised in, because I've been organizing for about 2 years, but that's pretty new, I would say. But in the beginning, one of the trainings that I received as an organizer is that it only takes 3% to make change, like 3% of your building coming together, 3% of your city coming together to make any kind of like real change. And so that means like 5 people, 10 people, 15 people. If and a small group. In the beginning, I was like, oh my God, we only have 5 people coming. 5 people is a lot. 5 people is a lot, because a lot of times they don't see anybody. Nobody comes to these meetings. It's mad boring, except if it's in fact impacting your life. Like then it's like really interesting and very crucial. And so regardless of how many of you there are, continually and consistently coming to those discussions absolutely brings it to the forefront of city council meetings. The next thing is to meet regularly with city staff outside of the city council, because you best believe landlords are meeting with city staff regularly, monthly, sometimes multiple times a month. And so when you have that kind of connection with city staff, and that is continuous, it increases your ability to impact city policy. And lastly, it would be to engage other parts of the city, like inspectors, right? Continually telling them, hey, my landlord isn't fixing this, I need this fixed. For you, it might just fix your fridge, but enough of those incidents documented actually leads to systemic change. Like Margaret said, cities function in data. If there's no data, they won't do anything. And that's really frustrating for a lot of people that I've met, right? Their car gets vandalized and they're like, hey, this happened to me. And I'm like, did you file a police report? And they're like, no, the police aren't going to do anything, which is true. The police can't fix your car. They just file a report, but that report is really crucial because it's not just about you. It's about, like generations to come.
Mm-hmm. Do you have anything to add to that, Margaret? Wow. Tough act.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like completely agreed with all of those things. I think, yeah, I noted before, yeah, you're right. Landlords and property managers have a lot of like pretexts for meeting with the city. So they already have the ear of the city. I think what is like challenging that what I've experienced when trying to like organize as a city staff with residents, which is again sort of this like backwards idea that doesn't work internally at the city to talk about it that way, and people out in the community get really confused when I've tried to go out and say, hey, we're trying to organize with you or support you in organizing around issues that you care about. People are like, but you're the city, like it's literally your job to like take care of the stuff that is going wrong in our lives. And like one of the things that one of the things I think that I don't know, I'm still working through that, and like what is the response to that. But one of the big things is that if it's not written down, if it's not policy or law, then the city has nothing to enforce. And if it's a private issue with your landlord, like in terms of like something that's written into your lease, but it isn't city ordinance, the city literally has no teeth in the issue. However, that's not to say, so you kind of have to start learning to like understand how to break down like who has the power within the issue. So it might be that, okay, I'm going to take the issue of predatory towing, and I would love, I don't know, were you involved with predatory towing at Georgetown, Fatima? Yeah, that's what I thought. Anyways, that's like something that we've definitely seen. So like the city has ordinance around towing on public streets, right? And we have authority over how much parking we can require or allow of a private apartment building. But like that's about the extent of our authority, right? As city staff. So when you go to me and you say, my landlord keeps towing me, we're like, well, you know, you were parked in the parking lot of your apartment building. We can't do anything about that. But you know who like does care about that and who you could organize against, which city staff can't really tell you to do, but you contact your city council person, right? Like city council people are different than city staff. City staff have less like tools in their toolkit. They can only enforce what is. And you can like seed ideas saying, hey, so actually in the case of towing, because we had escalated this issue and started talking about it and just sharing this information like with our city planners, well, when it came time to review our parking ordinances and our towing ordinances, they then reached out and said, hey, could you review this and look at this for us? And we got a chance to proactively look at this ordinance that and it won't address everything, but it could address a little piece of it, and we and do what we could do kind of like from an internal standpoint. That city council member, however, that represents the district where that apartment building is, where you're constantly getting towed, can have a more direct relationship with that landlord and say like, hey dude, I'm getting calls from your residents, they're all getting towed, you need to do something about this. And so, and another couple just notes that I jotted down that I wanted to just note really quickly, just in direct response of the city, is learn the planning cycles of cities. We as city staff or public sector staff in general, like our lives revolve around like planning documents and planning cycles. And it is pretty much like clockwork. It's boring, make your eyes glaze over work to try and pay attention to like committee agendas and like planning updates. But anytime that you see like comprehensive plan update, housing plan update, you know, street parking ordinance update, I don't know, like all these different things, we're like all of our work is guided by these like master documents. And if it's not there, then it's much harder to make the argument for like changing something or enforcing something. Like a staff might be able to make a recommendation for a policy change if it aligns with a planning document. So saying like, to be in better alignment with XYZ commitment that we made in this planning document, we recommend, you know, XYZ change. So, but really, really important to understand the planning cycles
And
of cities.
Where can you find those? Just as that,
Like,
because those are,
it has taken me my entire like it kind of guess it kind of depends on which part of the government you're targeting. So like the Metropolitan Council has a different like cycle than the city, and the Metropolitan Council, for example, sets standards and has like authority over cities and counties in terms of what they must put in their plans when it comes to like comprehensive plans. But Met Council does their comprehensive plan and did theirs in 20, you know, basically census data, then it comes out. So, you know, when census data came out in 2010, then comprehensive plan comes out and whatever gets done by 2014, 2015 gets approved. From there goes the guidance documents to cities that says this is what you must do in your guiding documents. And then from there, then cities have the several year-long process where they create their comprehensive plans. Then once they pass their comprehensive plans, basically, which just happened. So like in 2020 plans were due like at the end of 2018. And then from there, then they start doing all of the other like master plans as like a city. So just speaking from the city of Bloomington, from our comprehensive plan, after that one got approved, then like the parks did their park system master plan, and engineering did their bicycle and pedestrian plan, and the community development division did their housing plan. So like, yeah, I mean, it's a very long answer, but it's and this is why I say that organizing, when you're talking with city staff, like city staff are very aware of and like overwhelmed by how complicated the process is that they live in, and they're like trying to do like engagement in like from like June 1st to June 15th, we have scheduled some community engagement for our comprehensive plan, right? Like not realizing that engagement happens all year round, all the time, in many, many different ways.
That's shaking me to my core a little bit, because yeah, I do remember that experience so deeply of you guys, this is going to go on a lot longer than 3 months. We got to push on this just a bit harder and a bit longer, and it's going to be slow. This is all slow work, unfortunately. But, you know, when we really can take the reins and say, we need change, you need to focus on us, and you need to listen to us as renters, like, we can see some cool stuff happen. And I really love both of what y'all have added here.
And Fidumo just I was just going to say, responding Fidumo to just something you said, like about the idea of like the 3%, like literally, if you could gather 5 people that represent the issue that you care about, and you can get them, or you can get a city staff person or an elected official to come and sit down with them, that's like so amazing to city staff. Like it is,
they don't get it
because they don't
get that access.
They never get that access because they try so hard with their pretty posters. And this is me too, like I've done it too. I'm not trying to be judgy, but it's like just doing that is so powerful, is such a powerful like allyship with city staff that can really make huge changes. So
can make or break it. And as Juan mentioned, just to bump up the previous webinar we had, city staff stay for a really long time oftentimes in these cities. City council may move, but city staff are there. And if you're developing relationships with them, like, use them, get to know these people, because they make a lot of decisions and they know a lot of people. I do want to open up the floor because we're just about to hit 7. We got a little behind, but I got a little wrapped up in our conversation because I thought it was great. But if we have some questions from the audience, let's open that up for the last few minutes. And let's see what we got. Are there best practices from Minneapolis, St. Paul for organizing that the suburbs can use?
I'm not very familiar with Minneapolis and St. Paul's organizing, but I am familiar with IX, and they're based in Minneapolis. And for sure, I would say I consider myself a new organizer, and IX has absolutely helped me, teaching me a lot of the organizing basics, right? They helped us organize that towing protest, for example, the predatory towing protest, and they helped us understand, right, like how you plan and how you stay safe and how you coordinate all those things. But yeah, I don't know how they do it in their area, but they're really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think organizing is organizing. I think that it's not that there aren't best practices I think most of the best practices from Minneapolis, St. Paul can be applied. It's just that you're sort of organizing at a different level, because it's like you don't have this like pre-built like infrastructure for support and allies to pull in. It's like you're literally building all of that from the ground up. And so just like the simple act of like having like building community with people, like getting to know your neighbor. I know that sounds really fluffy, but like getting to know your neighbor type things, where it's just like it's and like just continually centering the like nothing, what is the phrase, nothing for us, about us, without us. And I think I see a lot of really well-intentioned like white suburban homeowners that like want to support like affordable housing and renters, but like don't have any renters involved in their groups. And like I know that it's easier said than done, but like you have to start there. And there's no like one thing I can tell you to do that, except for like you have to be in community with people. And like you can't like live in your separate house and then just like go to your separate church where you worship and like talk to only your same social circles and like care about these issues deeply, but then show up to an apartment building one day and like be surprised when people are sort of like, who the hell are you?
Right.
So it's like it's a very like if you care, then you have to be invested, and you have to recognize it's like a very long-term process. And it's a lot of like harm and kind of like unsupportive systems that have been set up that are preventing those relationships from forming. So like community building is sort of at its base.
Ooh,
also,
if I could add, so sorry. I think the main difference might be the distance or how far apart things are.
Yeah.
And so maybe like the city is a little bit more dense and it's a little easier to door knock and to people. But yeah, maybe planning and getting some nice walking shoes.
Mhm. And on that point as well, what I've noticed particularly within, like, you know, I'm from Minneapolis, St. Paul, those are like the places I grew up. Apartment buildings are pretty well integrated into places. But when you look into here, when you look into our suburbs, and the experiences I've had is they're dense concentrations. You'll have a lot of houses, you'll have a lot of single family houses, and then you'll have a lot of buildup of large, very large buildings. And it will be, you know, 4, 5, 6 multi-hundred properties within, it's kind of hard to tell blocks, but within like a mile radius, 2-mile radius. I'm really bad at measuring distance, but it's definitely walkable. I have done multiple, you know, Margaret and I have gone door knocking together, and we've hit multiple properties, and it's a lot of work. But
95-degree days we put in.
95-degree days, but we you know, that being able to do that, and like there is benefits to the level of like multifamily housing. And then also it's being surrounded by other smaller quad, what do we call them? Like duplexes and like quadplexes. A lot of those exist too. So you need walking shoes, and these buildings are really big, but they are densely populated. So if you get one, there's probably a bunch more around it that are in similar conditioning, like might have similar issues.
The other thought I have for like organizing, I don't know, the other kind of like tip is always look at like, what is the ownership structure of the building that you're organizing at? Like there's like specific affordable housing developers in the area that are very different from like a completely like mom and pop private landlord versus some dude. I could name names, but I won't, but like there's several dudes that might or might not have run for elected office in some of the cities where I've worked that are just like really crappy people and have really crappy apartment buildings that they manage. And like they own a pretty decent sized portfolio. And it's like, if you target that like network of buildings where they have residents maybe scattered across the city or scattered across a couple cities, but if you put strategic pressure on like across a network of buildings that all have the same ownership, that can be really effective too. And I know that there's been great organizing that's gone on like at Aon properties and stuff.
We've got one more question that I really would love to get to. With the trends you spoke to, are you seeing a hunger for rent control / stabilization policies in the suburbs like the ones that St. Paul and Minneapolis have been organizing around?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And especially in, I would say, a place like Brooklyn Center, because it's a first ring suburb, or like pretty close, maybe it's second ring. And because it's so close to the city, there's a lot of development that's eyeing it. And so there is gentrification is slowly entering the space, and rents are going up, even though maintenance isn't improving, services aren't improving, nothing is improving, but rent keeps going up. And it's because of, I don't know, Topgolf building a huge thing next to you, and all of a sudden there's this desire to there's just like new perspective in the area, like, oh, look what it could be. Ooh la la. It's my house, bro.
Yeah. This is like one of those topics where like as somebody who works like on the inside, that I wish that like I could more publicly support something like that, like rent stabilization. I mean, I can as a person. This is Margaret Perez now speaking, and yes, I fully support that. And like a million kajillion %, like if you were to ask like any renter, like what policy you would like first of all, a lot of renters, like if you start with the policy, they're not going to know like, oh, I don't know what policy, like just here's the issues that are happening to me, right? Like stop towing my car, stop raising my rent without making repairs, you know, like and so
and updates also, not just repairs, but updates.
Yes. Or like, could I get some new countertops, please? Could I get some new carpets? Like,
can we have
if you're going to raise my rent by $200? And the answer that the landlords are giving is no, and that's so crappy. So and then speaking from like the metro area where I'm currently working, like we have some more teeth to what we do because we administer the housing choice voucher program, and we're actually paying people's rent portions. And so we do have like a stronger, like, I guess, like economic pull. So like, for example, we can't do like rent stabilization, or at least we as staff can't do it, but like we've put in like an internal process or control in when somebody, because they have to report like what their contract rent is, and when there's an increase, they have to report that to us because we're paying a portion of it. And so whenever we're seeing a percent raise over like 5%, then that triggers a review by us, and they have to provide like comparable rents and justification for why they're raising the rent. But like, you know, we still don't have a lot of teeth. Like at the end of the day, the landlord has a ton of power, and they can just be like, well, if you don't like it, then we'll just non-renew this tenant then.
Which is why
it sucks.
Which is why just cause is so important, and to be able to show that solidarity. It, you know, Brooklyn Center set precedent now. It's already happened. This can happen anywhere now. So let's get on this.
Someone asked, isn't there already retaliation laws? There are retaliation laws, but retaliation laws require the tenant to prove that retaliation is happening, right? But with just cause, it's easier to enforce those retaliation laws, because now without a reason, the landlord can't cancel your lease.
It's 7:01, but we've got one more question. How do we feel? You got time for one more question?
Sure.
Good. All right.
Yeah.
If you were holding a housing forum for DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, what would you focus on?
Oh, I can go. I think it would be the production of housing, and then access to being able to partially own it, because the interesting thing is housing in our society is a commodity. So it's a thing that people invest in so that they can get richer and build wealth, and that's all nice and good, but that encourages a behavior where you want to fight for less housing so that your house becomes more valuable because there's less of it, right? There's more demand for it. But creating a society where we produce a lot of housing that fits the need of people, but then also giving people opportunity to own their living space would be really, really important for me, I would say. A lot of communities of color, right? Like they're big renters. And so giving them that ability to own the place that they live would be really crucial. I think when we would have a place where people can own their place, and obviously I'm not saying like it can't be a source of wealth also, but it wouldn't be like such like exorbitant prices that we're seeing right now, things like that.
And something that I would love to also add on to this is talking about like individual owning of units occurs other places. It occurs in other countries all over the place. So it is a discussion that can happen, and it is a reality that can be made if it's something that we work towards. Just the ability for a renter, maybe they don't want a whole house, maybe they love their apartment, and to stop them from ever getting displaced, to stop them from ever having to lose that, and also to be able to build equity and wealth through that. Why can't they buy their home? Might not seem very much to like people that own houses, but like 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, like you've lived there for a while, you know, why would you want to leave?
Yeah, I was once like dumb enough to, I think it was like on a survey question or something, to be like, if you, God, what did I ask? It's like, if you could live anywhere, it was in like a focus group. Oh man, it doesn't matter. I was like, if you could live anywhere, like what would your ideal home be? And I was like trying to get at like answers of like how people would change their current home, and everybody was like, well, I would love to live in a house with like fresh carpets and a dishwasher that worked, and you know, like, and it's like, I mean, it sort of goes back to like what Fatima was saying, like about like everybody wants rent stabilization. It's kind of like everybody wants, not, I guess maybe not every single person, but I would say like a huge percentage of people that are renters are like, would love to aspire to ownership or some form of like wealth building in the form of like, and just having like autonomy and control over their space and where they live, in terms of, you know, not having but anyways, and so it's, yeah, like I love that idea. Like, I think that could be an awesome focus of like a DEI type forum, like not assuming that it's all about renting, but also like how to build wealth as renters, and love some of the models you guys mentioned.
Great. Awesome. Well, I'm gonna wrap it up here, y'all. Thank you so much for coming. Audience, thank you for being so engaging in the chat. Love that. And thanks for the great questions. Really appreciate that. I hope everybody is walking away with a little bit of, little more information, maybe a little bit of a perspective shift, because, I learned some things here today too, and I love listening to y'all. So thank you so much. I hope y'all have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. We have these webinars every month, first Thursday of the month.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.